I'm Amelie and welcome once again to my channel. Today I'm going to be continuing with my Modal Sushi book report, and I'm going to be talking about chapters 11 and 12 that are the first two chapters in the refinement arc. And this is the fourth arc in the novel. And the refinement arc is actually 8 chapters long. As I mentioned in my last video, my original idea was to have the first 4 chapters in this video and the next 4 chapters in the next one. However, you may notice that I'm only talking about 2 of the chapters, and I have a very good reason for it. As I was reading, I only read up to the second chapter. I didn't read the whole 8 chapters yet, but as I read up to the second chapter, I realized that we were definitely heading for a flashback. And when I looked, I didn't read it, but I just glanced at the next chapters and I realized that I was right. The rest of the chapters in this arc are concerned with Wei Wuxian's time at Cloud Recesses. So it felt weird to separate it, like part in the present, then part in the past and something like that. So I decided to do these 2 chapters on the one hand, and I'm going to see what I do with the rest of them. I don't know if I'm going to do them in one video. There are 6 chapters, so we'll see. Or if I'm going to divide them in 2 and do 3 and 3. I think it's going to depend on the chapters, because sometimes it happens that it's a long chapter, but there is a lot of action or a lot of things, a lot of information that I don't really mention in this type of video. So in the end, is what I have to say is not that long. And there are sometimes chapters that are short, but they are absolutely full of things to say. So it's going to depend on that. It's something that I guess I'm going to read them, and then that's when I'm going to decide. But so far today, I'm going to be talking about only the first 2 chapters of this arc. So let's talk about the previous arc a little bit. The previous arc was Arrogance. And in the previous arc, we had essentially the encounter between Shang Chen, Wei Wuxian, and Lan Wangji. We had the whole deal with the fairy goddess statue and Wei Wuxian rescuing the juniors and all of that. But the most important part is that Shang Chen noticed something very familiar in this Mo Xuanyu guy. So he started to suspect that this guy was actually not Mo Xuanyu, but maybe it was Wei Wuxian back from the death. So he essentially whips in with Zidian. Zidian has this power to reveal, or not to reveal, to expel a soul. If a soul is invading a body, this whip will expel the soul, will just make it leave. So he thinks, that's it, problem solved. And yet it didn't solve anything, because we know that that is not what's happening to Wei Wuxian. The other thing that happened is that Wei Wuxian played a very particular song in the flute, and suddenly Lan Wangji is very adamant in protecting this Mo Xuanyu guy. So at the very end of the last chapter, which I guess it was chapter 10, Lan Wangji declares that he's going to be taking Mo Xuanyu with him back to Cloud Recesses, which nobody can believe. So that is where we left off. Let's move to chapter 11. And this chapter opens with a small description of Cloud Recesses, and especially focusing on its peace and tranquility. So obviously, there is a very strong connection with nature, I believe. So it's a place like it's surrounded by clouds and, mist, and talks about the morning sun shining through the hazy billows of mist. So it's a place that is described as very tranquil, very idyllic. It's definitely a place that is just beautiful to be, and beautiful to be at peace. There is a lot of emphasis in peace, because this peace is not going to last, because there's someone screaming at the entrance, and I guess we can guess who that is. It is who we think, Wei Wuxian, and he's not only crying and screaming, but he's also holding onto Little Apple. And Jingri, in this situation, obviously, we have the juniors as well, the junior disciples. So Lan Jingyi is there, I assume Lan Zixue is also there. Lan Wenji is also there, and Jingri wonders why Wei Wuxian is so unhappy to go into cloud recesses, because he seemed pretty keen on Han Wenjun before. And if we remember in the previous chapter, Wei Wuxian said that Lan Wenji was just his type. So Jing is saying, what's happening? Why now he's not that interested in entering cloud recesses with Lan Wenji? And on the other hand, we have Wei Wuxian, who is lamenting the fact that he never got to summon Wen Ning and never got to find out why he wasn't conscious. If you remember, Wen Ning wasn't like his real self. He was acting like, somebody who's not acting in his own will. So he was wondering about that. And obviously now that essentially Lan Wenji got him, he's not going to have a chance to do that. Then we find out that Wei Wuxian had already been at Cloud Recenses. He has studied there for 3 months, and he was familiar with the Lan sect, and he describes it in a way that is not very complimentary to the Lan sect. He says that they are dull. He complains that they have so many rules. They used to have like 30,000, and now he discovers that they have 4,000. So he's not happy about that. He's definitely a sect that it doesn't seem very nice to him. Let's just put it that way. And he's causing such a lot of noise that Lan Jingyi tells him that, loud noises are prohibited in cloud recesses, so he should stop. But obviously Wei Wuxian doesn't want to be there, and he thinks, well, maybe if I disobey some of the rules, they will just, throw me away. So he's definitely causing a stir on purpose. The other thing that he says is that he doesn't want to enter cloud recesses, because if he enters, it's going to be very difficult for him to leave. Because the only way to leave cloud recesses, and the only way to enter as well, is to having a Jade token. If you don't have a Jade token, then you can't enter or leave cloud recesses on your own. So this means that once he's in, he's going to stay in. So he's definitely causing, a stir to avoid doing that. Lan Wenji, he couldn't give less of a shit what he's doing. He's ignoring Wei Wuxian, and he essentially tells the other, and this is verbatim from the text, let him cry. When he becomes tired, drag him inside. Which, okay. Like, calm down. Okay. So, Wei Wuxian thinks that after being hit by Zidian, that should be enough proof that he's not Wei Wuxian. And that's, he thinks that might be the problem, that maybe Lan Wenji suspects or something, but he thinks, no, after being hit by Zidian, that shouldn't be, an issue. And that he had been making some, what he calls, repulsive comments. And that didn't work either with Lan Wenji. Lan Wenji still want to get him inside. So Wei Wuxian he's going to continue with the comments. Obviously, we know that Mo Xuanyu was gay. So Wei Wuxian seems to be, taking advantage of this, and also maybe taking advantage of thinking that others might be a little bit homophobic or something like that. So he uses that as a way to repulse, Lan Wenji. But boy, he knew. So Wei Wuxian tells them that there are so many beautiful young men in the sect that he's not going to be able to control himself. So again, this is another attempt to disgust them. And Lan Zixue tells him that, he's actually being brought there for his own good, because the alternative is for him to go with Shang Cheng. And we find out, well, we don't actually find out. We find out this in the previous chapter, But we know that Shang Chen has a tendency of not treating demonic cultivators very good, especially demonic cultivators that he suspect might be Wei Wuxian. And it says, during these years, there were countless people whom he caught and took back to Lotus Pier, and none of those people were ever let out. So I think we can read between the lines about what happened to those people. I don't think Shang Chen has a huge jail in Lotus Pier where he's keeping all of them. So I think, not good. Lan Jingyi also, agrees with Lan Zixue. He's a little bit more open with his words. So he tells me straight, like, how cruel Shang Chen methods are for people that practice that type of cultivation. And for a moment, he sort of hesitates in talking because, he's a member of the Lang Clan, and the Lang Clan, you're not supposed to talk behind people's backs. But he looks at Lang Wangji, and Lang Wangji doesn't say anything. So he doesn't mind. Lan Jingyi also makes fun of Wei Wuxian's flute skills, saying, like, nobody's going to think you're Wei Wuxian because essentially you can't play the flute for shit. And Wei Wuxian is actually hurt by this. Like, he said, no, he's trying to defend himself. But before he can actually do it, a group of land cultivators appear. And one of them sees Wei Wuxian and wonders aloud, like, the fact that Lang Wangji never actually brings people to cloud recesses. And Wei Wuxian describes this guy as someone who is the mirror image of Lang Wangji, except for the fact that he has a xiao hanging. How did I pronounce it? Xiao? I think so. Xiao that is made from white jade hanging from his waist. However, unlike Lang Wangji, another difference is the fact that this guy is smiling and that the color of his eyes are darker than Lang Wangji. So we know, obviously, for us to have seen the Untamed, and now we have seen the Donghua, we know that this guy is actually Lan Xishen. He's the sect leader, and he's also the brother of Lang Wangji. And then we got a lot of information about Lang Wangji and Lan Xishen, and we also find out that the Gusulan sect is actually famous for sort of nurturing handsome men. I guess if you're after handsome men, the Gusulan sect is the place to go. And also says that although they were very similar in appearance, they weren't twins. Lan Xishen was older, and their personalities were also very different. Lan Xishen was gentle and benevolent. Lang Wangji was aloof, stern, and keep everyone's at arm's length. So definitely very different. And this, let's say, particular personality of Lang Wangji is the reason why he ranks second in the list of the best-looking young masters in the cultivation world. And obviously Lan Xishen ranks first. But still second place is a pretty good place. Like, it's not... It's not too low. Second place is fine. It's interesting that Lan Xishen, when he sees Wei Wuxian, he actually doesn't react. He doesn't say anything. He sees Wei Wuxian, and well, at least he's not wearing makeup at this point, because I believe he took off the makeup in the previous chapter. But he's still a guy that is wailing, hugging the donkey at the entrance of Cloud Recesses. So he has to be at least a little bit curious. But Lan Xishen actually, he just smiled at him and just doesn't say anything. Or not that doesn't say anything, it's just he doesn't react in any way negatively or anything like that. So that is, I think, very interesting. And Wu Wuxian describes this as worthy of being a sect leader. And Wei Wuxian thinks the Gusulan sect they're huge sticklers for the hierarchy. So they respect people like, that they are over them in the hierarchy, people who are important. So he decides that what he should do is to just, mess a little bit with Lan Xishen, and that is what is going to get him thrown out. That if he bothers him, if he tells him the kind of things that he had been telling Lan Wangji, maybe that is his ticket outside of Cloud Recesses. But it seems like Lan Wangji was kind of reading his mind, because the moment he was about to open his mouth, his lips actually sealed and he couldn't say anything. So that was a good move for Lan Wangji. And then there is no choice but for Lan Wangji to, talk to his brother, and he asked him if he was going to visit Liang Fangsun. Liang Fangshun. Xingun Shao. If he was going to visit Xingun Shao, and Lan Xishen said yes, because they have to negotiate about a discussion conference, something like that. And then we got some information about Xingun Shao. So we know that he is the illegitimate son of Xing Wanshan, and the only illegitimate son that Xing Wanshan actually approved of. He talks a little bit, obviously this is from the perspective of Wei Wuxian. So he talks a little bit about the difference between Mo Xuanyu and Xingun Shao, and he definitely focuses a lot in how powerful Xingun Shao is now. So we have that information. Now we know also that Xingun Shao and Lan Xishen, they are sworn brothers. So there's definitely a connection between the Lans and the Jins. And then Lan Xishen tells Lan Wangji that their uncle had already examined what he had brought back from the Mo village. Obviously, they are talking about the arm. And it is then that Wei Wuxian feels like his lips suddenly unseal. And Lan Xishen comments that, again, Lan Wangji doesn't often bring people back to Cloud Recesses, and he actually says that he looks in very high spirits, in very good spirits. I'm talking about Lan Wangji. And this is something that confuses Wei Wuxian, because he looks at Lan Wangji's face and it doesn't look like he's in good spirits, but okay. And right after that, Lan Xishen tells him that he has to treat his guests with courtesy. And then presumably he leaves, because what Lan Wangji does next is to tell the juniors to wait, because I have to read this. I have to read this how it is. This is a phrase that needs to be repeated. Oh, where is it? Oh, here. He essentially says, drag him inside. Excellent. That is the peak of courtesy. Lan Wangji, well done. And they drag him. They drag Wei Wuxian inside. And we also find out that for some reason he had sworn not to step inside Cloud Recesses again. So again, it seems like we are anticipating a lot of things that are going to happen. We already know that he spent 3 months in Cloud Recesses, that obviously it didn't make a very positive impression, because he doesn't have a lot of good things to say about Cloud Recesses, and now we know that he has sworn not to step inside again. So again, knowing that the rest of the arc is going to be about his time in Cloud Recesses, I think they are anticipating that a little bit. And obviously they have to drag Wei Wuxian inside, and Lan Jingyi asks where they put him, where should we drag this guy inside. And Lan Wangji says the Jingshi, which this is something that shocks everybody, because this place is actually Lan Wangji's bedroom and also study, and he never invited someone inside. So already, I think there's obviously, the Lansec is not supposed to talk behind people's back. They're not supposed to gossip, but my God, I bet they're going to gossip anywhere. Then there is a description of this Jingshi, and essentially it's just very simplistic, very, tidy, very clean, very minimalistically decorated. So that's what we should know about it. There isn't a lot of things inside. And another thing that it's mentioned that is going to come out also a little bit later is the fact that there are like, what do we call this? Incense burners, I think they are, or something like that. So there is a very strong scent of sandalwood in the place. So apparently this is the scent that Lang Wangji likes. So Lang Wangji, leaves Wei Wuxian there, and he goes to talk to his uncle about, here it says serious matters, so I guess about the arm. And again, Wei Wuxian is left alone, which I believe is a big mistake, but okay. So what he does immediately is go outside and try to escape. But it turns out that it is impossible. Even trying to climb walls, it just pushes him back because he doesn't have a jade token. So once this is done, he realizes that, he can't go anywhere outside of cloud recesses. Apparently moving inside of cloud recesses is not a problem. Like, there's no one following him or telling him what to do. He's just there. But he can't leave. So he goes back to the Jingxi. And he says that he's not too worried because he believes that a solution will just present itself, which I think, Wei Wuxian is a pretty chill guy. So he just stay there, he hangs out, and then, honest to God, he says this. Again, this is another quote that I have to read because it's incredible. The refreshing scent of the sandalwood was cold and clear. Although it wasn't sentimental, it had its own way of tugging one's heartstrings. With nothing to do, he started to think random thoughts. Langshan happened to smell like this scent. So he's talking about a scent that is tugging his heartstrings and a scent that is also associated with Langshan. No fucking comment. And then he says, and with that in mind, like thinking about that this is the scent that he associates with Langshan, with Lang Wangji, the scent that is tugging his heartstrings, he says he couldn't help but shift closer to the incense burner. Like, Wei Wuxian, my dude, what? What is wrong with you? Let's just continue. So he gets close to the incense burner, and when he moves, he moves through the floor, and he realized that there is like a hidden compartment. And in this hidden compartment, or this secretive space, as they call it here, he finds something that surprises him, which is liquor. He finds a lot of liquor in a hidden compartment inside Lang Wangji's room. And obviously, I don't think it even has to be reminded that liquor is forbidden in cloud recesses. So again, he's pretty shocked. And Wei Wuxian starts looking back to the first time that he met Lang Wangji, and he remembers that in that time, Lang Wangji spilled a jar of Emperor's Smile that belonged to Wei Wuxian. And Emperor's Smile is this particular liquor that they make only in Gusu, and this is the type of liquor that was hidden in Lang Wangji's room. And Wei Wuxian says that after he studied here in his youth, when he went back to Yumeng from Gusu, that he assumed that he was never going to taste this liquor again, and that is something that bothered him. Like, he continuously remember that, there was this liquor that he actually really liked and that he would love to taste again. And obviously, finding liquor in Lang Wangji, who is as described here, a person as scrupulous as and abstinent as Lang Wangji. So obviously, this is something that he didn't expect at all. And in the time that took him to think this, Wei Wuxian had already finished a jar. And he didn't stop there. He actually continued. He said that he actually has a very high tolerance for alcohol and he loved to drink. And he also thought that it was fair enough for him to take the alcohol because Lang Wangji still owed him a jar of Emperor's Smile after, spilling his when they met. And so he's essentially just collecting with interest. So, good for him. So when he started to get tipsy, and God knows how many jars happened between, then and now, an idea came to him. And this idea was that he had to get a jade token. And his plan was to go to the cold springs and use the fact that cultivators will have to take off his clothes before entering as a way to get one. So the cold springs were essentially the opposite of a hot spring. They're just like springs that are incredibly cold, and apparently cultivators use these springs to meditate, to clear their minds. Also, I believe they have healing properties and they can improve your cultivation. So, those are the kind of things that are very important here. So he thinks there has to be one cultivator there that can steal a jade token. So he's about to go there, but he obviously sees that there is a lot of jars of, Emperor's Smile that he drank, and he has to deal now because what is he going to do? Leave them there? Which I guess if he was trying to annoy Lang Wangji, he could have, but I guess he's trying to be polite about it or hide the fact that he drank them. So what he does is he fills this jar with water, he seals them, and then he puts them back in this secret place that Lang Wangji had there. And then he goes looking for the jade token. And then we have some information about cloud recesses, including the fact that the cloud recesses had been burned during the Sunshot campaign, and then they had been rebuilt with the same structure. So the place looks essentially the same. And this means that Wei Wuxian can, orient himself pretty good. He can guide himself, and he knows how to get, to this place. And then he reaches the cold springs. And the thing about the cold springs is that, there's someone guarding them, but this person is very far away. It's like inside of cloud recesses, guarding this place is not that important. The security wasn't that strict because let's face it, none of the lands are going to be impudent enough to go there and watch someone bathe. And women didn't use these cold springs at all for some reason that we don't know. So they obviously didn't care that much about guarding them. So he gets there without much problem. And he does find, some clothes there, some clothes that were on a rock. They were very neatly folded and without any creases or anything like that. And even the forehead ribbon was there. So everything was there. So Wei Wuxian says, this is my chance. I'm going to look for the jade token. So he started looking, but he didn't want to make a mess of it. He was doing it carefully. So he looks towards the springs, and then that's when he sees a man, which shouldn't surprise because the clothes were there. This person in the spring was quite tall, and he described that his skin was fair, his hair was black, and what caught his attention is the fact that there was some scars in his back. But then he said, before that, he focused on the fact that, again, I'll read this because it amazes me. The lines which outlined his waist and back were smooth, graceful, yet holding strength. In simpler terms, he was a beauty. So, okay. And Wei Wuxian can't look away. But he goes out of his way to say essentially like no homo, because he is going to say that it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that the man is a beauty, that he's not attracted to men, The only reason why he keeps looking is the fact that this man has scars on his back. And these are scars from a discipline whipped. And it says that in different sects, this is something that they use to punish disciples when they make a very big mistake. And that after being disciplined with a discipline whip, the scars are never going to disappear. And then Wei Wuxian says that although he had never been hit by discipline whip, which surprises me, Shang Cheng has been, which again surprises me. But there we go. And then it says that usually they just give 1 or 2 strikes, because apparently this is something that is very, powerful. But this person here, this man that was in the cold springs, actually seemed to have received around 30 or something, whips from this discipline whip. So Wei Wuxian wonders, what could this man have done to deserve that? And then the man turns around and Wei Wuxian is shocked because he noticed that there is like a mark seared or burned in this person's skin. And this mark is just beneath the collarbone and near his heart. And that is the end of chapter 11. So we start chapter 12 with Wei Wuxian still looking at this man. He hasn't stopped watching this man for 1 second. And in this case, he got distracted by this mark and he didn't notice the man's face. Or in this case, the sword that was attacking him. And it turns out that this sword that attacked him was Bishen. And that the man he was looking at, surprise, surprise to no one apparently, it was Lan Wangji. So it says that Wei Wuxian was pretty adept at running away and dodging swords for some reason. So he manages to escape. He runs away and he only stops when he's caught by a group of people that they were passing by from night watching. And these people scolded Wei Wuxian because another rule of Cloud Recesses is that running was forbidden. And these people were actually the juniors, our little friends. So Lan Jingyi was there and Lan Zixue was also there. And Wei Wuxian was happy to see, to have another chance of being outrageous at them. And he thinks that he has another opportunity of being thrown out of the mountain. So what he does is imply that he was actually spying on Lan Wangji in the cold spring while Lan Wangji was just, in his natural self. So the juniors were shocked because they said that for them, Han Wenjun was so high and holy, and they were. It was someone that they were so in awe and they respected, that for them this was the greatest crime. They couldn't even imagine someone doing that. Lan Zixue was actually frightened to the point that his voice changed when he talks to Wei Wuxian. So that is the level they were shocked at this. And Lan Jingyi also was absolutely furious. And he says, "You damn cat's live," when I know cat's live mean gay, which is interesting because before they went in the entrance, they didn't actually, they seem pretty chill of the fact that, Mo Xuanyu is into men. And they even used that as a way to entice him inside of Cloud Recesses, saying, well, you wanted to be in with Han Wenjun, then you can go into Cloud Recesses. So you can tell how mad Jingyi is. And you can hear my dog, who is just being around me at this stage. So there we go. So Lan Jingyi is absolutely furious. And Wei Wuxian sees the potential of the situation. He says, this is my chance. I'm going to make the situation worse. I'm going to keep egging these boys. And he keeps going with the idea that he was, spying on Lan Wangji. So, again, Lan Jingyi was absolutely furious. There is a whole conversation. So in the middle of this absolute chaos, that's when Lan Wangji appears. And Lan Jingyi wastes no time in going to him and telling him all about the fact that Wei Wuxian, had been spying on him, how awful it was. So obviously, he was definitely very upset. Against all expectations, though, Lang Wenzhi just dismissed them. He said, well, okay, go away. And then he grabbed Wei Wuxian by the back of the collar and dragged him to the Jingxi. Which, okay. And here we find out that Wei Wuxian used to be slightly shorter than Lang Wenzhi in his previous life, but only a little bit. Here we have some measurements, but I'm not sure what they actually mean in terms of measurements that I understand. But for, in general, what we should know is that Lang Wenzhi, he used to be slightly shorter than what did I say? Wei Wuxian used to be slightly shorter than Lang Wenzhi, and now he's quite shorter than Lang Wenzhi, and this seems to bother him. And also the fact that Lang Wenzhi is quite strong, so it means that as he's being dragged, he can even struggle. And then Lang Wenzhi says, "Those who make noise will be silenced," which, okay, Christian Grey, calm down. So obviously, Wei Wuxian was very confused about this reaction because he thought this is the thing that's going to get him thrown out, but he's getting further in. And in other news, Lang Wenzhi carried him to the Jingxi and then proceeded to throw him in the bed. Wei Wuxian says that he was going to try to whine a few times flirtatiously so as to disgust Lang Wenzhi, and you have to admire the commitment of this man. But, this is not the situation. This is not the moment to do it, because you've seen what happened before. How do you think that's going to work? In any case, he didn't get the chance because Lang Wenzhi was standing there holding Bishen and looking down commandingly. And again, Christian Grey seems to be just possessing his body. And Wei Wuxian was used to seeing, a Lang Wenzhi that was more put together, Lang Wenzhi that was tidy and, smart and all of that. But in this case, this is not the Lang Wenzhi that is standing right in front of him. This Lang Wenzhi, I think he doesn't have his forehead ribbon because he says that he's used to see him with a forehead ribbon. So I assume he's not wearing his at the moment. And in this case, his hair is a little bit loose and he's wearing very thin clothing. So Wei Wuxian says that he couldn't help to glance a few more times. Which, same. Can we blame him? No, we can. And his attention was especially captured by the mark that Lang Wenzhi had in his chest. This is the burn mark, the sear mark that he has. And this catches his attention because Wei Wuxian says that in his previous life, he had exactly the same mark in exactly the same place. So, weird, a mystery. He also wonders about the scars. He says that Lang Wenzhi had been famous from a very young age, and he had always been a paragon of excellence and virtue. So Wei Wuxian wonders what he could have done to be punished like that. Like, what action that he did could have needed a punishment that was so extreme. And again, obviously, I guess we'll find out later. When Lang Wenzhi noticed that Wei Wuxian was looking at his mark, he covered it very quickly, and he became sort of indifferent again. He became like a blank face rather than a commanding face, I guess. That's the moment when they hear a bell coming from far away, and this is the bell that indicates that it's 9 o'clock, and this is time to sleep for the Lang clan. So, bedtime. And Lang Wenzhi informs him that he would be sleeping there, and then he takes off again. He leaves them alone. And apparently the Lands sleep from 9 to 5 in the morning, which my sleeping schedule is absolutely screwed up. So I have to admit, and I'm trying to fix it now, but it's difficult. I have to admit, I envy them. I would like to have that sleeping schedule. So Wei Wuxian didn't think Lang Wenji recognized him. Like, it's not like he thinks like Lang Wenji knows who he is, because he thinks that the technique that Mo Xuanyu used to bring him back is something that not only is prohibited, but also is something that very few people know about it. He says that's something that was passed down the generations, but only in a partial way, and it was very difficult to access, very difficult to do it. So, and a lot of people didn't know about it. So he doesn't think that Lang Wenji figured out that, he's Wei Wuxian. And he also said that Lang Wenji couldn't have recognized him from the awful flute melodies, which, okay, that's all I have to say. And this is when he starts thinking about his relationship with Lang Wenji in his past life. And he admits that they have a lot of shared experiences, like studying together, going on adventures together, fighting together, but that ultimately Lang Wenji was a Lan disciple and he had to be righteous. Something that wasn't really compatible with, Wei Wuxian's personality. So in the end, although they have a lot of shared experience together, they were, I think they were like acquaintances or something like that. Or I think that's the level of the relationship that he would describe. And he thinks that in Lang Wenji's opinion of him was probably the same as everybody else, that probably he also thinks that he was this absolutely horrible person, this Yilin patriarch persona that all those rumors have created. So if Lang Wenji were to know that he was Wei Wuxian, he probably would have already fought him. He says that in the past, Lang Wenji didn't tolerate anything that he did. And, now, anything that he did to annoy Lang Wenji, he just didn't succeed. So, he wonders just why, what's happening. So after a while thinking, Wei Wuxian decides to go to bed. So he moved to the other bedchamber when Lang Wenji was sleeping. He was there, just peaceful. And he still had hopes of getting a jade token. And he says, maybe this is my chance. But just as he was extending his hand, presumably to grab one, Lang Wenji opened his eyes. And Wei Wuxian had been discovered. He had several options, several things that he could have done. But what he did was throw himself on the bed. And he knew that Lang Wenji hates physical contact with other people. And in the past, he would just hurl anyone who would dare to touch him. So, he even thinks that if Lang Wenji doesn't react to this, then it's possible that he's not actually him. That maybe, I don't know, his body had been taken or something like that. So he jumps on the bed. So Wei Wuxian's body is essentially sort of hovering over Lang Wenji, like he's sort of kneeling, I think, with one knee in either side of Lang Wenji, but he's not completely over him, and they're face to face. So again, in this game of gay chicken that Wei Wuxian is playing on his own, he decides to start getting closer to Lang Wenji's face. And he gets closer and closer until he says it became hard for him to breathe. And that's when Lang Wenji tells him to get off. And unsurprisingly, Wei Wuxian refused. So he tells him that when Lang Wenji allowed him to sleep in this place, that he should have known what was likely to happen, that this is something that could have happened because he had made his intentions pretty clear, according to, Wei Wuxian. So Lang Wenji asked him if he's sure of what he wants. And Wei Wuxian hesitates. And in this, I feel like he's survival instinct is just kicking in. So he decides that this is something that he has to consider carefully. So he was about to answer, and he was, about to smile, so we can guess what he was about to answer. And that's when his whole body felt numb, and suddenly he felt over Lang Wenji. So he was essentially using Lang Wenji as a mattress. And this was obviously unexpected. Wei Wuxian was not expecting this to happen. He tried to move, but he couldn't. And he started to wonder what had happened to Lang Wenji in these past few years for this to be something that he would be doing, for this to be something that it was acceptable for him. Because obviously, this is not the same Lang Shan that we had 13 years ago. And again, he wonders if maybe his body had been sized. And finally, Lang Wenji moved under Wei Wuxian. Wei Wuxian, was a little bit hopeful for a moment, thinking that, well, maybe this is also uncomfortable for him, so he's going to just let me go or something like that. But no, Lang Wenji was just waving his hand so to extinguish the light, and that's it. And they go to bed like that. And that is the end of chapter 12. So, my God, what these two chapters, they were obviously not, again, there wasn't a lot of action. There wasn't a lot of things that happened, especially if you compare them to the previous chapters. But I don't know, there was so much. These two chapters were just so full of things that are interesting. Let's just put it like that. So let's go back to chapter 11. I have a few things here to comment. The first thing that I would like to talk about is the fact how the Lang clan is described as almost this sort of monastic type of lifestyle, I guess, with the rules, with the zen in the place where they live, the tranquility, the calm. And I think this is very interesting because a lot of people always complains, or I feel like I've seen a lot of complaints about the Lang clan and the rules. And obviously this is not something that I've seen here, but I'm just using this medium to talk about it. I feel like a lot of the rules are pretty, obviously some are a little bit weirder, but most of them, they seem pretty reasonable. And I read somewhere that a lot of the rules are just very similar to the kind of rules that monks have in monasteries. So I think this is, done on purpose to create, this sect that is, high above the mountains, but also high above the mountains in a spiritual way, if you get my meaning. The other thing that I find interesting is Wei Wuxian not wanting to go to cloud recesses. I guess it's because he is afraid of being discovered, but also because he was interested in I guess summoning Wenning and see what happens to him. But also obviously because he knows that one he's seen is going to be very hard to leave. But it's interesting how adamant he is of not leaving. Obviously in this case it's different from the Untamed, because in the Untamed, I believe that the moment their eyes met in what episode was this? Episode 2, when Wei Wuxian was playing the flute and Lang Wenji grabs his hand, I think it's understood that Lang Wenji is like, yes, I know who you are. And Wei Wuxian is like, oh, okay, you know who I am. There was never any doubt after that, or any moment it's like, oh, you're Mo Xuan Yu. There was never any doubt. So, obviously in this case, it happens differently, which I'm fine with. The idea that you need a jade token as the only way to get in or out, that is something that I find interesting, because one of the things that I remember for episode 3 in the Untamed is how easily Wei Wuxian entered cloud recesses. Like, he just broke that barrier with his fingers and that's it, he entered. And I guess I always wonder, like, there isn't a lot of security there. Like, why don't they have guards during the night? I guess they were living in times that were in relative peace, like they weren't expecting someone to just enter, and maybe the barriers were more made to indicate that you weren't supposed to be there, rather than, I don't know, averting an attack or something like that. But it's interesting that in this case, the security of cloud recesses is a lot, stronger, which it makes me curious with some of the events that are going to happen later in the book. Wei Wuxian being surprised about Lan Wenzhi not reacting the way that he expected. And what I find what I find interesting about this is the fact that Wei Wuxian doesn't describe his relationship with Lan Wenzhi as a particularly close one. He definitely describes him as someone who he knows, he has shared experiences, and that's it. He doesn't describe like a friend or anything like that. And yet he has a very set way he expects Lan Wenzhi to behave. And I compare this to, I think it was a scene, I don't remember exactly which chapter, but it was in the previous arc when he first met Shang Cheng, that he's talking to him, and how he predicts and how he knows how to behave in a way that would provoke whatever reaction he wants from Shang Cheng. And obviously he knows Shang Cheng very well because, they grew up together, they spent years together. So obviously they knew each other very well. However, Lan Wenzhi is not described that way. He, we know that they were, maybe at most friends, but he's so surprised of the fact that Lan Wenzhi doesn't act the way he expects. And obviously you can say that Lan Wenzhi is a person that is so strict with himself and he was so, rigid, that is not someone who he expected to act differently. But I think there's also a sense of showing in a way how Wei Wuxian perceives their friendship or, their relationship as not, a very deep one or a very, close one, but that in fact he actually knows Lan Wenzhi very well, and he knows how this is going to behave, and he knows what buttons to push, or at least what used to work before. Although we know why Lan Wenzhi now he doesn't react the way he thinks, but I'll leave that for later. Both in chapter 11 and chapter 12, I feel like there is a lot of Wei Wuxian playing maybe with the idea and, that others think that gay men are predatory. So he uses that a lot to threaten the others, like when he says that, he's not going to be able to control himself with so many, handsome young men, or telling Lan Wenzhi when he's in the Jingxi that he should have expected for him to behave like this. So I feel like, it's not only that he plays with how the others perceive gay men, but also his own maybe internalized homophobia of how he believes gay men behave. So I don't know. I consider that very interesting, especially if you compare it with Lan Wenzhi, who is a known gay, well, not a known gay man. I don't think anybody knows, but for us the reader, especially for us who already more or less know the story, we know that Lan Wenzhi is a gay, a gay man, and he behaves nothing like that. So obviously this idea that Wei Wuxian is playing to what means for him to be gay and how he can weaponize that as a way to achieve his own end. I don't know. I thought it was pretty interesting. Another thing from chapter 11 that I found very interesting is Lan Wenzhi just letting Lan Xingyi trash talk Shang Cheng without saying anything. And again, it's such a subtle way of telling us how Lan Wenzhi feel about Shang Cheng. And it's something that I don't think I would have got if I hadn't watched the Untamed, or if I didn't know anything about this story, even the first reference, like in the previous, I think it was the previous arc, that we had the first meeting between Lang Wangji and Chang Cheng, and the fact that Lang Wangji doesn't say a word to him, he doesn't talk to him. I don't know if it's something that I would have noticed if I was reading this for the first time without knowing anything, but it's interesting to see these little suggestions, these little clues that tell us, Lang Wangji, tell us how you really feel. I think we can tell pretty well how he feels about Chang Cheng. He definitely doesn't like him. I also find it very interesting, Lan Xishan's reaction to seeing Wei Wuxian for the first time. Obviously, Wei Wuxian has Mo Xuanyu. And I find it interesting because I think I remember in one of the previous chapters, when Lang Wangji sees Mo Xuanyu for the first time, and I remember that Wei Wuxian was surprised because Lang Wangji didn't react in any way. He didn't say anything. He didn't make fun of him. He didn't laugh. He didn't look shocked, which is, I think, pretty much the standard for Lang Wangji. He just pretty much, he was there. I think he nodded to him or something like that. He acknowledged him in some way, just continue his way. I find it very interesting that Lan Xishan acts the same way. Obviously, Lan Xishan, he acts the same way, but in a more friendly way. But he sees, this guy just crying and clinging to the donkey in the entrance of your sect. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't react. He doesn't, he doesn't have any comments to say like, what is happening here? What's wrong with this guy? He just smiles and, just continues the conversation as if anything. So maybe it doesn't, I don't know how diplomatic they are, or I don't know. I think it also talks maybe a little bit about Lang Wangji's and Lan Xishan's training in terms of how they express emotions to the outside world. Which I think obviously I think Lang Xishan is a lot friendlier and a lot more amiable than Lang Wangji. But I don't think that means that he expressed all of his opinions, not of his opinions. I don't think that means he expresses all of his feelings to the outside world. I think he uses his friendliness also as a mask in the same way that Lang Wangji uses his blank stare. So I think it's interesting to see this, I don't know if it's maybe, I don't remember if it's one of the clan rules to not judge other people or something like that, or if maybe this is a way of avoiding conflict or whatever, I don't know. But it's interesting to see these small moments that show, how in different ways Lan Xishan and Lang Wangji are also very similar in that sense. Next, I want to talk about something that I found very interesting about chapter 11. And first, let me make like a parenthesis about the novel. I've seen this novel described as a third-person omniscient novel, as in the types of narration, which I don't think is correct. I think it is a type of third-person omniscient, but it is limited. And that means that the narration is not a narration that knows absolutely everything, but it's a narration that focuses in particular in a character. So we know what that character knows and what that character feels, and still a third-person narration, but within the perspective of a certain character. And so far, these two chapters had been told, or I think most of the chapters, at some moments, they focus on another characters. I remember a moment in the previous arc that was focused on Lan Zixue. But for the most part, these chapters are focused on Wei Wuxian. He is our point of view character, even if it's in the third person. So that's why I find this description very interesting. And I'm talking about the moment that Xingun Zhao is described. And what I find very interesting is that there is a touch of, I guess you could call it saltiness in the way he's described. in the sense that he's not described in a very flattering way. And specifically when it's described how different Jingun Shao and Mo Xuanyu are. And in this case, I feel like a lot could have been said. A lot could have been said about the difference between these two characters because they are essentially like night and day. So you can talk about, their abilities, their intelligence, their cultivation level, anything. There's a lot of things that you could have talked. However, this description focused on how helpless and powerless Mo Xuanyu was. But on the other hand, Jingun Zhao is described as someone who has immense amount of power. Described as someone summoning the winds and controlling the rain. And I feel like there is a certain level of censure in this type of description, and obviously because of the type of narrator that we have, we know that this description probably comes from Wei Wuxian himself. Obviously it is not openly made by him, but it's from his perspective. So I feel like these are probably his feelings about Jingun Shao. So again, he doesn't think very well of Jingun Shao, which is strange because I don't think he knows that much. I think the reason why maybe he may not think too well about him is the fact that he knows how Mo Xuanyu was treated and he knew how he lived. And in comparison to his half-brother, who's living a great life. And also the fact that it focuses on how much power he has. Like, Jingun Shao could make anything happen, could say, we should do this, and it happens. So I think maybe it's also, I don't know if implying, but maybe wondering why Jingun Shao left Mo Xuanyu live that situation, why that happened, why he left his half-brother, in just living through that situation that was absolutely horrible. So I believe that's probably why, but I do find it very interesting, especially with, what happens later in the book, what we find out about Jingun Shao and Mo Xuanyu and all of that. But again, I find it very interesting that so early in the novel, Wei Wuxian seemed not very fond of Jingun Shao. The next one, Lang Wenji being in good spirits. I love the fact that his brother is the one who can read his absolutely blank expressions. And I love the fact that Wei Wuxian just looks at him and his face is absolutely blank. Like, how? What good spirits? What do you mean? But also the fact that, it has been 13 years since Wei Wuxian was dead, and now he has him back, so no wonder he's in high spirits. So I think maybe this helps justify the fact that maybe Lan Xishan didn't say anything about how weird was that, Wei Wuxian was there, because I think he thought, if it makes Lang Wenji happy, then maybe I shouldn't intervene. I shouldn't say anything to ruin this for him. I'm just going to pretend everything is fine. I'm just happy for him. And that's maybe why he didn't say anything. But, just hilarious. Especially because one of the things that I love about the Untamed is Wang Yibo's face when he plays Lang Wenji, absolutely blank. Especially, I think in particular, one face that he made when the first time, not the first time because they hadn't met before, but when Wei Wuxian was drinking for the first time in Cloud Recesses, that he was on the roof and suddenly he looks to the side and Lang Wenji is standing there. That is a face that I imagine Lang Wenji making all of the time. That absolutely blank face is the face that I have in my mind for Lang Wenji. So that is the face that I imagine Wei Wuxian looking at when Lan Xishan says he's in good spirits. I'm like, yeah, are you sure? Again, what do the people in Cloud Recesses think about Lang Wenji bringing someone to his room? like, again, it's not a sect that is supposed to gossip, but we know that they probably did gossip. We know that Lang Jingyi went back, to the rest of the juniors, and they were discussing this, well past their bedtime, because how couldn't you discuss this? This is the hot gossip of the year. Can you imagine? I love that. Just the fact, just take him to, and again, just just drag him into my room. It's like, are you okay? The fact that another thing, the fact that Wei Wuxian sees himself as a prisoner of Cloud Recesses, but the fact that he can go anywhere, like he leave the Jingxi, and he could just go anywhere. It's not like he had somebody trailing him because they didn't trust him. He didn't have a guard. He didn't have anything. Obviously he can't leave, but there's still, I feel, a lot of trust in just letting him wander around. So I don't know. I don't think he's necessarily a prisoner. Again, especially with this version of Lang Wenzhi, who's a lot more forceful, I don't know if he would actually let him go, but I definitely don't see him as a prisoner of Cloud Recesses at this stage. Or if he is, it's definitely a weird prisoner, because, again, nobody stops him from going anywhere. He can go wherever he wants. Obviously, Wei Wuxian's obliviousness when it comes to his attraction for Lang Wenzhi, that is, I'm going to talk about a little bit more about that one for chapter 12, but my God, it's just incredible. It's just incredible. Obviously, someone who hasn't come to terms with his sexuality, because of the way he portrays a gay man, you can tell that maybe he has some internalized, homophobia that he has to deal with, and all of that. But some of the things that he says are just, incredible. Just, the fact that the smell of sandalwood, which is a smell that he associates with Lang Wenzhi, is a smell that pull his heartstrings, and he actually gets closer to the incense burner to smell it. That is just, it's like peak comedy. Just watching that, it's like, Another thing that I found very interesting is they say that the discipline whip is, because I kind of assumed that was, when I watched the Untamed at least, I kind of assumed that was a punishment only in the land sect, but it turns out that it's actually a punishment in several sects, like, a lot of the sects apparently use this, and I think it makes sense because obviously this doesn't take place in a particular time in the past, but I believe that in this type of genre, corporal punishment is not something that is that rare. I wouldn't say that it's something that happen continuously, and also because I haven't seen that many things on this genre, but it is my understanding that it's something that it does happen, and it's not something that surprises a lot. Obviously not to the level of what happened to Lang Wenzhi, but I'm going to say whatever I'm going to say to that when that actually happened. But again, I don't know why I was so surprised the fact that they actually had ways of punishing disciples in other sects. I mean, we know that the Shang sect had Madame Zhu and Xidian. I don't know if that was the punishment that we saw her punish Wei Wuxian, but that is the punishment that he used for other disciples. I don't know, but definitely interesting that it's more of a common punishment than anything else. Okay, let's move to chapter 12. Chapter 12 doesn't have that many things. I feel like chapter 11 was the juicy one. In terms of how many things, this is juicy, but in a different way. The first thing that I noticed about this chapter is just how sweet the little Lan juniors were protecting Lang Wenzhi's honor when they find out that Wei Wuxian was just spying on him. They were they were so shocked. They couldn't believe somebody would have dared to spy on Lang Wangji. And I have the feeling that Lang Wangji was there. You know what? I wasn't bothered. I think if Wei Wuxian wants to look, I think he's welcome to look at Lang Wangji. But I love the juniors so much. They're so adorable. About Wei Wuxian, and again, as I said before, this is a third-person limited omniscient narration. And I think also that's what makes it so funny when we get all these descriptions from Lang Wangji and the things that Wei Wuxian thinks about Lang Wangji, and the way, Lang Wangji, in the way Wei Wuxian, just expresses things, describes things, everything that he says is everything that he says about Lang Wangji, absolute gold.
I tell you, you can zing your arrow into my buttocks anytime.
Okay, you know what you do? You buy yourself a tape recorder, you just record yourself for a whole day. I think you're going to be surprised at some of your phrasing.
I love him. The fact that he can stop looking at him, and the fact that, even before when he was in the Cold Springs, he no homo, but I can't take my eyes off him. And again, when he's just thrown on the bed, everything that happened, like him just obviously he puts an excuse, but again, that's why it's so interesting, this type of narration, because you can see maybe the different ways Wei Wuxian needs to justify things to himself, or needs to, explain to himself that no, it's not that he's gay, it's just something else is happening. But how much that is a cover, that deep down we know what's happening, and we absolutely love it. Also, another thing that I already mentioned in the previous chapter, but it's good to mention again, how sure Wei Wuxian is in his knowledge of Lang Wangji and how he's going to react. Again, he says that the relationship, I guess, is merely acquaintances or something like that. But I believe that, again, this is a case of him minimizing things, or, maybe from his own perspective or something like that. He doesn't realize that maybe the relationship is a little bit closer than he believes, but he's definitely acts like someone who knows Lang Wangji very well. He knows what he has to do to make him react in a certain way, and I love that. The other thing that happened in this is essentially Lang Wangji turning into Christian Grey in some parts of this. And I remember the first time I watched The Untamed in the first episode, the moment I saw Lang Wangji, I thought, that is a guy who has a dungeon in his home. And I don't think I was wrong. I feel more justified than ever to say that, because, my God, the way Lang Wangji acts in this is incredible. I just speechless. You know what? I wouldn't be surprised if he actually has a dungeon. I don't know if in this adaptation we have the cave in the Cold Springs, but if not, I think I found Lang Wangji's dungeon location, because I feel like, first of all, again, I feel like Lang Wangji found Wei Wuxian again, and he's just not willing to let go of him, and a lot of his assuredness and a lot of his acting like that is maybe partly that, and also maybe a little bit of frustration of Wei Wuxian acting like that, because obviously he can tell. Lang Wangji is smart. I think he can tell that Wei Wuxian is acting this way to bother him, and I think that maybe hurt him a little bit, in the sense that he wishes that was real, but it isn't, or at least it's not something that Wei Wuxian is taking seriously, because obviously he's not acting like Wei Wuxian. He doesn't know Lang Wangji knows who he is. So, I don't know. I feel maybe that's why, but I think there's also some part of him that is a little bit more domineering, let's say, more commanding. And I know that this novel has some extras. I know. I don't know. Does something happens in the novel? I don't remember. I know. I have heard some things about the extras. I don't know if something happens in the novels, but I know that this novel gets spicy, and it's going to be very interesting when I have to cover those chapters, because I'm going to cover the whole novel, extras and all. I can't promise to be very descriptive if things get too spicy, but I'm determined to cover everything. But I think I can get a glimpse of maybe how Lan Wangji is going to be in a more intimate situation. And you know what? I think Wei Wuxian might be into it. I don't know. Okay, so that was the end of it. I don't have anything else to say. This was how. Okay, so only 2 chapters, but it took a while. I had a lot of things to say about this. I also had to insert that video, which is not something that I do often, but I felt it was appropriate because I wish I could record. I wish Wei Wuxian recorded himself and then he hear himself like just see what the kind of things you are thinking. Like, put this into perspective. I love it. I am really liking this novel. I'm very looking forward to see the kind of shenanigans that await me in Cloud Recesses, especially because I think these chapters are more or less the more light-hearted ones. I think that after this, we're going to have maybe chapters that are going to be more depressing, and that's fine. But I have the feeling that maybe the Cloud Recesses ones are going to be, maybe a little bit happier and a little bit just fun. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm also surprised that Wei Wuxian only stayed 3 months at Cloud Recesses. I know, I knew before that he was expelled before he completed the whole course, unlike the Untamed that I think he stays 6 months and he leaves when everybody leaves. He's not expelled. But 3 months doesn't seem a very long time, especially if you consider, just just a lot of things happen in those 3 months. Let's just leave it like that. Okay, guys, so I hope you enjoyed this. I hope I wasn't too rambling of this. I am recording this very late, as usual, although I did say that I was trying to improve my sleep pattern, but it's just not working. I just have issues with it because during the year when I'm working, I tend to work very late. My sleep pattern is all over. Now that I'm on a break, I'm trying to, get up early and exercise and all of that, which is very difficult because I usually go to bed incredibly late. I go to bed probably at the same time that the Lans are waking up. So just to give you an idea. So nothing. I have to start, especially now that I don't have a school next door making noise, I have to start recording this during the day. So hopefully the ones next, in the next week, I don't know. I think they're going to be next weekend, the next update. I think it's going to depend whether I decide to do them all together or divide them. If I divide them, if I do 3 and 3 in 2 different videos, the next video is going to be next weekend, and the other the weekend after that. If I decide to do them all together, obviously it's going to be a longer video because I don't know how long this is going to end up being, but these are only 2 chapters. So if there are 6, I imagine that is going to be pretty long. Probably that's going to be, not until the other week, not next one. But we'll see once I continue reading them. And once again, I want to mention, especially because I've been seeing a lot of people receiving their new books of Modao Sushi and, all of the rest of the books, just make me jealous of that. I want those books so bad. But no, I think if I were to try to buy those books, my credit card would just implode. Just they say nope, it would just leave me. I I just can't. But I do encourage everyone who can buy the books, who, they have the money, and they have, no financial problems or anything like that. Like, as long as you can do it, just, I encourage everyone who can to do it, not only because obviously to get a good translation and a good edition, and it seems it has a lot of extras that are very interesting, and it has illustrations. It's obviously something that is worth having. But beyond that, I feel like supporting this is a way of showing publishing houses and, companies like that there is an interest in publishing these types of books for this market, that there is a place for them in this market. And if we hope to have more books of these types from other writers, which I know that there are a lot of these types of books from other writers, and it would be great to have a lot more of these types of editions. So if for those who can buy them, then please go ahead and buy them. I think it's definitely worth it. And I just don't want to see the pictures on Tumblr, because it just makes me I just want those books. But no, we are fine. We are fine with the edition, with the version that I have. Maybe in the future when I manage to save enough money, then I'll be able to get those books. But so far, please keep buying them, keep supporting them, just so everybody knows that we are interested in these types of books. Okay, guys, so I guess I'll see you next week, or maybe the next, who knows, with the rest of this arc. I hope you enjoyed it, and that's it for me. Bye-bye, guys.